In the wake of the whole Charlie Kirk nightmare, I stumbled upon an interesting concept. I was pondering the question how you would attribute responsibility in this case. How would you know who is responsible and whether, for example, the assassin was radicalized by left wing radicalism or something different? How would you know? How would you know that it was? The question that I'm raising here is the few snippets that were shared from the communications that he had within the group, to me, didn't seem very radical at all. They didn't seem very hateful. I mean, I don't know what else they will publish in the future, so it might easily come out that they had some kind of agenda and it was a group thing and it was people were mutually spiraling up themselves and becoming collectively more angry. I mean, this could easily be the case, but equally, what's possible, at least right now, is that the perception of how the other side talks to you, how the other side uses language about you, for example, language around trans people. I mean, just notice the fact that the first thing that Fox News did after they learned that the assassin had a partner was they had to point out that the person was a trans person, right? You don't know anything else about the context of the whole thing yet, and yet they had to make the point. I think this would not be something that wouldn't be tolerated in Austria, for example. I think there are good reasons for why there are journalistic standards that you have to keep, and to really be careful about the images that you're invoking in people's heads and associations that you're creating in people's heads, particularly when you're trying to convey information and when you're trying to stay fact-based. So just by virtue of being confronted with the kind of speech that the other side is using against you, how would you know that this is not the thing that radicalized the assassin? How would you know that it was the language that was used in the in-group and not more the language that was used from the out-group that was coming in from the outside? Because this was language that, I mean, if I imagine to be a trans person, and this is the thing that you read, right? The partner of the assassin was a trans person. This is obviously not something that is supposed to just have an objective, informational value to tell you. There's absolutely no reason why you should be interested whether the person is a trans person here. It's there, the word is there because it wants to create connections in your brain. It wants to create associations with danger, assassin, trans person. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. It has absolutely no factual value apart from that. And that's obvious to everybody. And imagine you are a person like that and you read that in like one of the biggest news outlets in the country, and everybody's grieving over Charlie Kirk's murder. And then you are being associated with that. I mean, I don't know how I would feel about that, mate. I just wouldn't want to be in that situation. I'm really glad I'm not in the country in the first place. This looks really bad. And for me, the question is like, how do you know? How do you know, in principle, on which side to push blame and who is responsible, in other words? Because it seems like there's no single causation. There's no single cause for the whole thing. It's not like somebody just said one word and you commit some kind of atrocity. This is not seemingly how it works. So it seems to be a combination of the language that you feel is being used against you from the other side, the other camp. It might be also radicalization on your own side as well. There are many groups which are extremely problematic and extremely hateful, and they themselves are even over-exaggerating meanings and putting things in people's mouths as well. But is it like, should we forbid words like, for example, Nazi or fascist? Because these are actually technical terms. They have a technical meaning. And if you meet certain criteria, someone is absolutely, I think, legit to say that you have fascist tendencies. You are doing things that are typical of fascist behavior. And you can come up with 10 or 20 criteria that have been worked out pretty well. They have been shown that they exist in different fascist contexts and in different historical even movements. You can see the same patterns emerge. There's something like a family resemblance there, which can be pointed out. So it can't be just words. It can't be the word is causing you to do something. And what I came across is the notion of the asymmetry of perception. That's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. But when you use, for example, the notion Nazi or fascist, right? Because many people just recently said you shouldn't be allowed to use such words, or you should be more careful. Not allowed, but you should be more careful with using such words, because such words radicalizing people? Well, the thing is, we have an asymmetry of perception. We perceive words in a different way. And the way we perceive those words, whether they will radicalize us, whether they will induce fear in us, is really dependent on the context in which they are used, or on the social context. So it depends more on other things that are happening in our lives than on the words themselves. The words themselves can have a factual meaning. They don't necessarily have to mean something that means immediate danger to us. So just by virtue of having been called a fascist, this doesn't necessarily mean that the person who has been labeled as fascist is someone that you want to get rid of, or so somebody would want to incite violence against. It can be just a purely technical term. On the other hand, you can use another term that is not so negatively associated historically, which in the right kind of context, in the bad kind of context, can itself actually be scary, can actually be inducing fear in the person. For example, take the term trans person. This is something that is not neutral. It's not something that today we use in the way that we want to just designate some biological features about the person. But it's a latent term, particularly in the present day environment. The term associates certain feelings in people, whether they like it or not. This is something that's working on a cultural level. And those feelings are mostly negative. Whether you like it or not, the term is something that is negatively associated. And being called a trans person, I think for many people might itself already be fear-inducing. And here's the asymmetry of perception. The asymmetry of perception is that how we perceive terms, and whether we perceive them to be offensive, and whether we perceive them to be radicalizing or inducing some kind of impulsive reaction on us, and even causing some form of violence, really depends on the social context within which we're moving. And it, of course, also depends on us as individuals. So it's not like everybody will be... take the jokes that, for example, the former American President Obama made about Donald Trump on this famous dinner that everybody was mentioning, right? Not everybody would be equally humiliated and equally angry, right? The way Trump obviously was in this very situation. It really depends on the person. It depends on the social context, and it's not a clear-cut thing where you could say one word, the word is dangerous and you should never use the word because the word causes violence or radicalization. This is not what I think is the key. The key is the social environment. The social environment in which, after you've used certain words, you get together and have meaningful exchanges after that. If this is not happening, words gain a different meaning and words become more dangerous, and can, just as words, be much more problematic and much more hurtful to people. And that's something that I think we oftentimes don't even notice. We don't notice that words that we just use easily and sloppily and just on the side actually create a lot of pain on the other side, without us even noticing. Again, the asymmetry of perception. We don't even notice, and we think, but it's just a word, right? But on the other side, it creates a lot of pain, and particularly when this is combined with a sense of not being seen, not being recognized, a sense of humiliation, and this happening again and again and again. So the words being used again and again and again and again in a humiliating fashion, in a derogatory fashion, then we're getting into trouble. Then we're really getting into very troubled waters, because then radicalization is really not far. But when you have somebody who feels humiliated, you're not very far from, not many steps away from radicalization, I believe. And it's difficult. I don't know how to deal with this, because on the one hand you might say, well, look, this is the self-responsibility of people to not be affected by words. But on the other hand, that's the function of language. The function of language is to create connections between us, to make us feel proximate and close to each other, and also to create boundaries. And really, it's one function of language to create boundaries and keep other people away and to humiliate. This is an objective function of language, whether you like it or not, and it's all involved there. And I wouldn't know how to navigate these waters, but it's just obviously not as simple as, hey, well, let's point to certain words and let's not use those words because this will change everything. This is ridiculous. It's absurd. I don't know how people can think that this will make a difference. As long as you don't change the culture, and the culture of how we meet each other and how we see each other, how we exchange ideas with each other, Changing individual words will make absolutely no difference. It might make things even worse. And this is what we've seen, that this is particularly visible in progressive culture. You can have the nicest, the best words, and people will still feel humiliated. And people still will get angry. And you will still have social conflict. This alone won't do the job. And I think this is a huge failure of progressivism. Progressivism was far too focused on what words to use, how to properly use them. And I think there was the silent idea that just by changing the language and using the right words, you will create social bonds and you will create social experience and you will create shared pathways between people. That's not how it happens. This is something, it's not even a good substitute at all. It makes people even long for the more perfect words, for the even smoother words and nicer words. This is endless because it never creates the kind of social reality that we want to experience and the kind of connection that we want to experience. The sense of being seen. It's never going to be there just by using the right kind of words.